Okay, let's get started. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us today for the webinar. We'll be talking about 5 common misconfigurations that can threaten your public cloud resilience. With me today, I'm Iris Zarecki from Continuity Software, and with me today is Avi Aharon, our VP of Cloud Business. Hi, Avi.
Hi, everybody.
And in today's webinar, we'll be talking about a couple of topics. We'll start by talking about the state of the cloud and talk about some trends and phenomena that are affecting the cloud scene today. We'll move on to do some sort of a reality check and see how resilient is the public cloud today. We'll continue to talk about those 5 common misconfigurations that we see among many of our customers today that could threaten your resilience, and some possible approaches on how to solve these issues. So let's get started. When we talk about the status of the cloud and the evolution of the cloud, we see very clearly that on one hand, on the right-hand side, the total global workloads is growing exponentially on the cloud from something like 29 million in 2006 to almost 600 millions towards 2013. And this is based on a research paper by Vmware. We're also seeing that public cloud and private cloud are gaining momentum. And if today it's something like 45% on public and private cloud, towards 2022 in this research, it's going to be significantly bigger. Anything to add here, Avi?
I think that what we currently see with our customers is that basically it's a combination of private cloud, public cloud, and remaining with their on-prem environment, but they are definitely migrating and as part of the digital transformation, moving step by step into the public cloud.
Exactly. So as we move on to the next slide, we see exactly that. We see that 81% of the enterprises already have a multi-cloud strategy. So they might have, like Avi mentioned, a public cloud or maybe multiple public clouds, multiple private clouds, and some of the IT left on their on-premise. So the result of that is that on average today, enterprise already using almost 5 public and private clouds today.
Yeah, and I think that what is very interesting is that we see that most of the enterprise customers started with AWS because they were the first, but slowly they are adding additional public cloud vendors, and the second one to come is definitely Azure. And looking into the future, probably they will add Google, and they will have also a combination of different kind of services, such as IaaS implementation or platform as a service, or in some cases, of course, using software as a service. So it's a mix of all this together.
Interesting. And maybe one more phenomenon to talk about in the cloud is the pace of innovation. We see this example coming from AWS, and they are announcing almost 4 new innovations a day. In 2017, last year, they announced 1403 new launches throughout the year. That's an amazing number, isn't it, Avi?
Yes, I think on the first quarter of this year, they got to around 500 per quarter. As you said, it's getting to 4 new features a day. It's a lot of information and a lot of knowledge that customers need to handle. And we do see the same not only coming from AWS, but also from their competitors. And definitely it's becoming challenging for our customers. But with this, I can say that there's a lot of new stuff and a lot of interesting technologies they can implement within their environments.
Okay, so what does it mean with regard to resilience? What's the impact of all of this hybrid, very important pace? How does that relate to resilience?
So I think kind of reality check we did within enterprise customers. So as usual, customers expect always on services 24/7, and they expect that public cloud will solve this challenge. But the bottom line is that the gap is not closing, and we do see outages, and we read about that from time to time. I think something very interesting that one of our partners did is that they came out with a survey to their largest enterprise, and what they've realized that more than 50% of them do believe that the responsibility is within the cloud provider themselves. But this is definitely not the case, and they like to share responsibility, and they like to share it when we see the huge page that they provide to enterprise customers regarding sharing responsibility around security. They're not really taking the responsibility on themselves, and the same is for availability.
Interesting. So a shared model here.
Yeah, they like to share, definitely. Okay, so as said, some examples, and we read about it day after day. Netflix is a star in the news. From time to time, we read about Netflix outages. Netflix streaming services went down on Saturday on my favorite show. And then the question is, why Netflix is not resilient? We see that coming from WhatsApp, and then customers are starting to migrate to the competitor, Telegram, which gains millions of new subscribers because of WhatsApp outage. Simple, which is a digital bank part of BBVA, had a glitch over the weekend, which basically caused their customer not to be able to view transactions because of a backend server maintenance. The major AWS S3 typo, which caused $150 million damage only to S&P 500 index, and we read more and more about outages over there. So a bit about the challenges. So I think it's a combination of three. Cloud resilience is not guaranteed. As discussed initially, customers deploy on a multi-cloud and hybrid environments. They are using different kind of services, either managed or unmanaged, with a multi-layer cross-domain. With large enterprise, there is definitely a major challenge handling policies within multiple teams, vendors, and solution providers. As the knowledge is growing day after day, it's becoming challenging to see how you can implement within your environment all the knowledge that is out there. You want to be sure that you're aligned with the best practices coming from the vendors themselves, and it's becoming challenging. And moving to microservices technology, we do see customers deploying to production 10 times a day and more, and they need to be sure that after each deployment, they are still remaining resilient. So practically, it's almost impossible with existing toolkit, and definitely major challenges.
Interesting. So you're saying that you would think that if you move to the cloud, all your resilience issues will go away, but the reality is that they're not. They're still with us. So let's look at a couple of examples of how misconfigurations can cause you an outage. And the first one is all about service limits, right? This is a great terminology in AWS. It's all about service limits. What are we seeing here, Avi?
Yeah, so in this case, it's an example of a customer which has deployed a specific account in North Virginia, and we do see that in that account, the customer is using 4 auto-scaling groups, and all these 4 auto-scaling groups are using the same machine, which is M1 large instance. And the default limit for that specific instance is 20. The current stage is that the customer is currently using 16 instances. So the customer did not get yet to the limit, But once the load will grow, the customer possibly can cross the limit, and then it will cause a major performance issue, or in some cases, even an outage. The maximum that the combination of these 4 auto-scaling groups can grow to up to 36. So this is just one minor example of a misconfiguration that can cause downtime in this specific environment.
Mm-hmm. Any other examples that you can share with us regarding limits?
Basically, for any resource in AWS, there is a limit. Let's take an example with RDS, which is a very popular service at AWS. RDS databases, AWS managed databases, has a capacity limit. So just imagine that on a specific account, there is a limit for a specific RDS for up to 1 gigabyte, but the customer is running several databases on RDS database on that account. Each and every one of them is not meeting the capacity limit, but the combination of them can cross it. And then the customer may feel a database fail. Wow.
Okay, our next example is around scaling groups. Walk us through it, Avi.
Yes. So again, scaling group, a very popular service at AWS. Part of the ability to scale up is to make sure that each and every instance that needs to scale up has all the resources available. In this specific case, what we see that one of the resources, which is a block device snapshot, was deleted. And for that reason, this auto-scaling group will not be able to scale up.
Yeah.
Which will cause with an application downtime. By the way, this is very a popular misconfiguration. Once customers create kind of relationship between different accounts or share. In this case, sharing is becoming very problematic because one of the administrator on a specific account can delete a resource which won't be available to the other account, and definitely it might be problematic if you're using public accounts. So again, shared resources.
Right. And moving on, our next example is about Kubernetes. And everybody's talking about Kubernetes, right? Everybody wants to go to Kubernetes. Can that threaten my resilience?
So Kubernetes it's a major world by itself. So we do see our customers having a dev environment and moving to production environment with Kubernetes. It's very interesting, and definitely a microservice is part of the today's world and tomorrow. This is only one example of a misconfiguration within Kubernetes relating to affinity rules. So here what we see is that the customer define a hard node affinity, which require that the nodes will run under a specific instance type. In this case, it's a C5 instance type. And once one of the availability zone fell down, the pod will suffer from downtime because it will not be able to move to the other availability zone in which C5 instance is not available. So this is just one simple example of one misconfiguration within Kubernetes. We do see a similar problem also in Vmware regarding affinity rules. So, yes.
Okay. Our next example is about data loss. Again, a very, very important issue. What do we see here, Avi?
Yeah, so in this case, what we see is an incomplete VM snapshot for a specific instance in the customer account. One of the disk drive snapshot is not there for a specific point in time, which means that let's say that the customer will have kind of a cyber attack even, which in that case, they will require to restore to a specific point in time. They will not be able to do that because one of the disks does not have a snapshot.
Okay. And our last example is around insufficient subnet addresses. Take us through this, Avi?
Yes, what we can see over here is that a customer defined by default a subnet, which the maximum amount of addresses is limited to 256. Currently, for this specific subnet, the customer is using 238 addresses, but the customer has a 4 VM scale set, which can require to grow to an additional 28 addresses. But the bottom line is that on this specific subnet, the customer can consume only additional 18, which will eventually cause the customer to suffer from potentially an application downtime.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we saw 5 examples of misconfigurations. How common is it among enterprise organizations, Avi?
So I think it's quite common. These are only five examples, but there are so many best practice over there, and the stack is growing every day. So these are only 5 we shared, but we do see a lot of misconfigurations, and definitely it's a major challenge for enterprise customers.
Okay, and let's talk about some of the possible approaches customers take in order to resolve or avoid these misconfigurations.
Yeah, so I think I will point out 4 main options. Starting with, I would say, small companies. So they can definitely use a manual testing. It's let's say it's not applicable for medium or large customers, but for small companies as a start, it might be efficient. The second tier can be customers that are writing their own scripts. So they do kind of a automation. They collect information from their environment and they run kind of analytics on top to make sure that they are aligned with specific policies that they are aware, and they would like to check that their environment is meeting. But then it's very limited because they need to make sure that they have all the knowledge there and they are up to date, and they will require to work in order to make it happen. So this is a viable option, but it will require a lot of work from the perspective of the customer. Another option is an out-of-the-box solution, which is provided by the cloud providers themselves. AWS provide their own AWS Trusted Advisor. The Trusted Advisor is kind of a basic tool. It includes 4 pillars: security, cost performance, and availability. I think AWS came out with this tool 3.5 years ago. And on availability, they have around 22 checks, which is not so much. It's not going anywhere. They are not investing so much in it, but it provides kind of a basic tool that will give you kind of alerts in case of some basic misconfiguration in your environment. Azure has the same. The name is Azure Advisor, and they have around 5 checks around availability. They do include same 4 pillars as mentioned for AWS. What is important to say that these solutions are only for a specific cloud provider. It's not a combination of multiple cloud or hybrid environments, so it's not providing really a single pane of glass and handling the overall risk within the customer environment. And the last option is automation tool that basically provide a single pane of glass, collect information from the customer environment, and include ever-evolving checks within that platform. So I think that this is the most, I would say, advanced solution, which is enterprise grade and can meet all the major challenges that we talked initially. So this is what it looks like. This is an example of our solution. And what you can see over here is a specific customer that deployed its production environment under AWS and Azure. What we can see over here is a single pane of glass, including a healthcare score for the overall environment. For each and every region deployed, we can see the scoring and the risk detected for each region. And we can drill down either based on a recently open risk, urgency, if it's high, medium, or low, impact, if it's downtime, data loss, security, best practice, business impact, and even domain. If it's a virtual machine, load balancers, networking, RDS, etc. Once we drill down, we can see all the risk, and digging into deep, the description of a specific problem and a recommendation in order to handle the potential risk detected.
Wow, impressive. But how does it work? So
basically, there are 4 steps within the platform. The first step is scanning the environment. So what we do is we collect information based on native APIs provided by the cloud providers themselves. If it's AWS, Azure, or others, we do that without any installation of an agent. We can also collect information from Kubernetes or from third-party vendors such as Spotinst or Azure Service Fabric. And once we collect that data, the data is modularized within a huge graph database. And on top of that, we are running our analytics, which are all the checks that we are adding on a daily basis. So it's a growing stack. And once we detect a risk or a misconfiguration, which is not meeting the policy, we will alert and we come out with a risk and recommendation in order to handle that risk. I think that you saw that initially we provide a single pane of glass and give our customers the ability from top down to make sure that they are resilient. And if they are not, we are pointing the risk and making sure that the customers are handling those risks.
Great.
So, thank you. So just to summarize, I think Project Coral, which is our technology, is a combination of IP, it's all the knowledge that we are bringing into the table. As part of the technology and on top of the knowledge are all the machine learning algorithms and crowd knowledge, which is part of our overall solution. A single pane of glass, which provides our customers the ability to make sure that he is resilient with his hybrid multi-cloud environment. And I think what is very interesting, and I think most of our customers really like it, is the ability on top of the knowledge that we bring on an ongoing basis, is to add their own policies and add their own custom checks. So this is part of our community. They can share it or they can use it with their own needs. But eventually it's giving them the overall solution as required.
Great. Thanks a lot, Avi. This was very comprehensive. And now let's move to the Q&A session as promised. So in order to submit a question, please use the questions pane on your webinar control panel. You see a picture of what that might look like. So please start submitting your questions. And we'll give everybody a couple of minutes to start submitting the questions. And of course, we'll take them one by one. Great, Avi. So the first questions are piling up. Are you ready?
Sure.
Excellent. So the first question is from Alicia. She's saying, you mentioned that AWS is adding 4 new features a day. Can you practically update your platform so frequently? How do you catch up?
Yes, thank you for the question. So definitely, this is part of our technology. Basically, we spread the application itself and the check engine. So we are using a GroovyScript as our engine, which gives us the ability, based on a simple JSON file, just to add or to collect information from new domains that we did not collect previously, or to add additional checks and allow them to be available to all of our customers very quickly. So definitely this is something that is part of out-of-the-box technology that we provide. And I think later on we are going to provide our customers on top of already APIs provided, but is the ability to add using a basic UI tool very quickly their own checks in order to add on top of the ongoing data that we provide their own checks into the platform.
Great. Thank you for the answer, Avi. Questions are piling up, and we promise to answer everybody today or after the webinar. Let's take the next question from Justin. The question is this: what about infrastructure as a code, for example, CloudFormation or Terraform, and other automation tools? Are they solving the same problem?
Thank you for the question. So in general, automation tools are being used more and more. They don't solve the problem because you can automate whatever you want. You want to make sure that whatever you automated is done properly, and eventually you find your environment configured properly. So I don't think that automation tool can solve the problem. You need to validate after you automate that whatever you did will keep you in the right situation and make sure that you are fully resilient. Does it answer the question?
I think so. Thank you. Let's take the next question from Steve, and maybe after that we'll take the question from Francis. So the question from Steve, Avi, is you said that you are preventing outages. Are you also providing any auto-healing capabilities?
So currently, we are not providing auto-healing capabilities. Traditionally, most of our customers are large enterprises, and we are getting only the ability to get a read-only authentication, authorization into their environment. So we are not capable to do anything. We collect information, if it's AWS on a role-based authentication, if it's Azure based on a service principal, but eventually it's a read-only. We do have intention to provide in the near future kind of a plug-in. So based on the remediation and the recommendation that we are providing our customer, the customer will be able to get, based on an API, the required code in order to fix its environment, and they can add it into their pipeline and do it as part of their automation process. But we are not going, in any case, we are not going to do it for them. We'll provide them the code and they can deploy it.
Got it. Okay, let's take a question from Francis, Avi. He's saying, you are saying that both Azure and AWS have similar solutions. However, those solutions are not cross-vendor and certainly not as robust as continuity software products. Is that correct?
Yes, I think I mentioned that. Thank you, Francis. The out-of-the-box tools that the AWS and Azure are providing are basically handling their own environment. So AWS Trusted Advisor may give you some insight about AWS. Azure Advisor will give you insight on Azure. So it's definitely not a tool to handle the overall hybrid multi-cloud environment. The knowledge is not there, and it's not for that. It's more, I would say that it's not even an enterprise-grade tool, even if you are running only AWS, but it's definitely a very good tool as a start. And we do see a lot of startups and a lot of developers that are starting very small and they grow. So initially it provides some information. Definitely it's not the right tool for an enterprise running a hybrid multi-cloud environment.
Great. Thank you. I think we have time for just a couple more questions. So guys, if you have something burning, please submit it now through the question pane. In the meantime, let's move on to Janet's question. She's asking, what is the number of checks that you offer? How can we test it?
So currently we have hundreds of checks, around 500 for AWS and Azure. And I think the ability to try and test it is using our starter package, which is including a 1-month subscription. And at the end of that process, we are also packing a very valuable, what we call a health check report, which will include a kind of executive summary and all the risk detected in the scanned environment. It's limited to up to 1,000 nodes, but I think definitely very much valuable in order to understand what is the value of our offering.
Great. Thank you. And Avi, I think we have time for one more question. So let's take the question from Bill. He's asking, do you collect configuration data up to the VM level?
Yes. So I think I discussed on the way that we collect information. So initially we used out-of-the-box APIs, but we have also capabilities to collect information on the kernel parameters of the OS running on a specific instance or unmanaged databases. And we do that based on out-of-the-box agents provided by the cloud providers themselves. As an example, SM agent provided by AWS and VM agent provided by Azure. And there are some other ways in order to collect it. Again, it depends on our customer's requirement, etc.
Great. Thank you, Avi. I think we're running out of time. So if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to send them to us over email and we'll send you an answer privately. Of course, we'll be happy to share with you the trial package and get you started. So if you're interested, let us know. And as you can see on this slide, we'll be very happy to see you next week at reInvent. Avi will be there. We'll be happy to schedule a meeting and meet you there. And the week after in the Gartner event in Las Vegas. So feel free to call us and set up some meetings with us. We'll be happy to see you in those events. And with that, we'll finish the webinar. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.